Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1517 of our daily content grind. We are going to be looking back at the original Transformers cartoon today for Here's 10, and we're going to be focusing on the characters that, frankly, that cartoon did not focus on. So despite having a near 100 episode run across 4 years, the original G1 cartoon did leave a few characters hanging out to dry. Now, for the sake of this list, we aren't going to go for easy ones. Obviously, Roadbuster and Whirl were never in the original cartoon. That's a licensing issue. I'm also not going to with anything easy like, oh, well, they never gave Laserbeak an episode. We're going to have actual discussions about characters who could have actually conveyed themselves as characters. Not that Laserbeak didn't, but it's not exactly a character that could carry an episode. We're going to be focusing on the characters who, frankly, put in appearances. In some cases, they put in a lot of appearances, but never were in a starring role, nor did they have any kind of episode dedicated to them to tell a story all their own. We're going to talk about them today, and yeah, some of these might be divisive. Admittedly, some of these might be down to just a faulty memory. I do have 2 seasons worth playing on the TV here in the shop, so I would like to think I'm up to date on some of these. But for now, let us begin. Here are 10 G1 Transformer characters who never got their own episode. Admittedly, I am going to start with some low-hanging fruit because these are characters who really weren't intended to actually have episodes of their own. They were really there to fill space, and that is Reflector. Now that said, Reflector was supposed to have a bigger role. They were supposed to have cooler abilities, like long before the Insecticons got to do the whole self-cloning thing. His whole thing was going to be to project multiples of himself, hence the 3-in-1 toy that he would eventually have as a mail-away exclusive. That got written out. And pretty late in the game, too, because there's still a few animation glitches that show it. I wasn't going to include him originally, because he really is just there to give the Decepticons more things to be shot at. But he does have a character, there is traces of a personality, and they did use him for spying and info gathering, similar to how they use Soundwave. So they were using him. But despite being such a unique character, one bot spread across 3 bodies, they just didn't take advantage of that to tell any kind of story, and that's where the character gets held back, unfortunately. I really like Reflector. I really, really do. I think the character has tremendous amount of potential, but no one has really tried to actually capitalize it. They certainly didn't in the original. We need to talk about the Datsuns here, the Fair Lady Z's. We need to talk about the Autobot equivalent of the Seekers, because frankly, they do show up a lot, but they really do not get much focus on their own. But the one that I have to single out here is going to be Blue Streak. So, Prowl kind of does. I look at the episode roll for it, where he does get a scene of a starring nature. But really, I could have thrown Prowl on this list too. But I do feel like that episode gives him enough of a spotlight. Blue Streak kind of takes a backseat to Prowl in that one, and thusly he kind of falls by the wayside. I feel like a lot of the confusion to Blue Streak's name is not only the fact that he's not blue, but also the fact that they never really gave him a dedicated character episode where you actually figure out why his name is Blue Streak. Frankly, even in the 80s, talking a blue streak was kind of an old idiom as it was. So they really did need to do something to focus on the character and actually bring out the personality for everyone to understand what they were going for. But unfortunately, with no real focus and no starring episodes, Blue Streak just never got the chance, leaving decades of mystery as to why a silver, black, and red character was called Blue Streak. If he had gotten a character episode, I don't think so many would have been confused for so long. Now, in a similar vein, I have another set of characters who are often seen together, but both of them desperately needed some kind of episode, and I don't feel really ever got one to themselves. And I'm going to focus on Sideswipe here. Sideswipe is one of those characters with a ton of appearances. He is one of the most frequently appearing Autobots during the battle scenes, but he never really has much chance to show a personality. Even Sunstreaker, who also could have made this list by the way, got more chance to show personality than Sideswipe did, who I really think boils down to one line of, "I'm finally going to get into a fight." And that really is like the only time I ever heard him convey a personality where he really likes to get into a good scrap. Now, again, this feels like one where I might be misremembering, but genuinely, I cannot for the life of me remember an episode that just said, "I'm a Sideswipe episode." It just doesn't exist. Don't remember it. He makes a lot of appearances. He has a lot of episodes, but none dedicated to him and none where he gets to tell a story. Again, I feel like it just kind of leaves him feeling generic. If Sideswipe and Sunstreaker were brothers, where is the episode explaining how robots could be brothers, or explaining or showing some kind of familial bond? We don't ever get that, do we? So no, missed opportunity. It really could have been either of them. I'm just putting Sideswipe just a little bit ahead on really needed something. So for 2 entries now, I have actually done like a this or that kind of thing, where I could have put one character on the list, but their related character, they deserve to be here a little bit more. And this is where we talk about 2 that I have to put in together because they're frankly almost always seen together, and that is Skywarp and Thundercracker. Again, characters who put in a ton of appearances, but never really starring in anything. I think the closest Thundercracker gets is like one of these Insecticon episodes. He basically substitutes in for Starscream, who prior was punished by Megatron from a previous incident. It would be weird for Transformers to have like a character continuity across episodes in season 2. It wasn't unheard of then, but it was rare. So maybe that was the intention. Maybe that's why Thundercracker gets an extra episode. Poor Skywarp, on the other hand. He really does not get anything. You want to get across his bullying nature, the fact that he just kind of is a prankster and just likes to be mean to people. You don't really get that. There's nothing really conveying that outside of him just being the one who does the evil cackling amongst the Decepticons whenever something bad is happening to someone he doesn't like. He really gets that villain role, that cheap villain role. But again, even though Skywarp gets some personality shown, and Thundercracker does have an episode where he subs in for Starscream, neither of them really get to tell a story. Neither of them have a starring role. Even Thundercracker's episode, he really is just second fiddle to Starscream, or to Megatron and Soundwave. So I can't even give him credit for that. It's just 2 characters who showed up a lot together, never got to do anything aside from just being on the front line. And I'm looking for and just have their cool little moments, but I'm looking for just a little bit more than that here. I have now cheated many times in this list already. I have gone from this either or character could have been here to these 2 characters are always together, so they are in together. And now we have to talk about an entire team, and that would be the protectabots. The closest they get to an episode is Bot. And that is not an episode you really want to feature in. Frankly, they are tertiary to Swindle's shenanigans, as well as the human side of the storyline, which no one really likes to discuss, but we have to admit exists. So, yeah, horrible episode aside, they really only have 2 episodes that vaguely define them as a team before, basically vanishing for all of season 3 until we get to the finale, where, they just threw all of the combiners in. We got to see the origin of all the other Autobot combiners. We got to see the Technobots and the Aerialbots being born. We got to see the Stunticons being born. We got multiple Constructicon origin stories. The only ones we're missing for origin-wise are the Predacons, who got a full episode devoted to them, but and then like the Terrorcons, who I think had just as much screen presence as the Protectabots, with maybe a little bit more voiceover time. I know it's strange, you know. They just kind of showed up. They had very little like proof of existence, and then really didn't have too many strong showings. You know, even in Bot, you know, their big thing is like, I have a force field. Oh, my force field's gone, and I'm blown up. And that's their contribution. It's all side character stuff. It's all just cleanup duty. They don't star. We don't see their origin. They're just kind of there one day, and they don't really get any time to shine on their own. It's just weird considering every other combiner team got more than them. You know, maybe it's just the weird spot they were in. Bot was the last episode of season 2. It wasn't their first appearance, but they barely made a dent in the show in their first appearance. So, yeah, I think they just kind of ran out of time to include them, that's all. Something I was surprised by in these episodes, when I went through all these episodes and all the characters from the first 3 or 4 years of Transformers, I looked at all the mini-bots expecting to be like shocked at how many would be on this list, and I am, but not for the reasons I thought. Excluding the season 3 cast, which pretty much immediately get killed off by Trypticon outside of, you know, Outback and Pipes, we really got episodes for all of them. You know, Cosmos has an episode. Sea Spray has an episode. You know, Powerglide has an episode with his name in it. Even Warpath got an episode. Gears got one. Windcharger, I would even say, got a starring role as the hero of an episode. Not Huffer. Huffer is, again, one of those characters who puts in a ton of appearances, but never carries an episode on their own. You know, they do a lot of really cool things. They lifted a woolly mammoth. That was kind of cool. Felt like the animators meant to use brawn in that scene, but hey, it was something. They gave him something, but he's not the star of that. You know, that's the Dinobot Island episodes. Clearly, he's not the star of the Dinobot Island episodes. I feel like the character is just written to be unpleasant enough to, like, why would you devote an episode to a character who's always complaining? There's that. But I feel like he just kind of got lost in the mix. You know, there's a ton of Autobots in season 1, and really only a few episodes. Like, it's like 22 episodes in season 1. You know, compared to over 50 in season 2. So the season 1 cast, like, they do a good job of getting them in and out. But for the most part, only a few got into season 2 as full episodes. So someone was bound to get left behind, and I believe it's, above all, it was Huffer. He makes a ton of appearances. He's got some good moments. A lot of these on this list have really cool moments, but they don't get to tell their own story, and they don't get to carry an episode. So there's the whole point of the list. Huffer just feels weirdly out of place amongst the mini-bots because he's the only one in the first 2 years worth of that entire size class that didn't get his own episode, which is very, very odd when you look back on it. Hence why he gets to be this high up on the list despite being, you know, what you would have thought was a minor character. No. Because of that weird exclusion, he gets to be in the middle of the list. Justice for Huffer. Now, here's one that you are not surprised is on a list like this, because frankly, how do you use this character in this normal, like, carry an episode type of situation? How do you use Metroplex as the starring character? Anytime Metroplex shows up in the series, he acts mostly as a set piece, with the exception of, like, when his eye got stolen and he's, like, freaking out and the Autobots have to deal with them themselves. But really, he doesn't get any starring role. He doesn't get to show personality. He doesn't really get to be a major focus. And that shouldn't be a surprise because, yeah, he's a city bot. What are you gonna do with him when most of your cast are the size of one of his knuckles? Well, they used Trypticon, didn't they? Trypticon had whole episodes devoted to him. He was palling around with Octane, stealing things from around the world. You know, that's a starring role, so I can't put Trypticon on this list. They focused Trypticon. And even like Headmasters, I'm only going with the original American broadcast. Headmasters actually did use Metroplex as just a normal character. It wasn't a special event when he transformed. He was like any other Autobot. He was just there and transformed as needed, you know? So they actually did successfully use him. And they did even include things like Six Gun and Scamper. Like, they used his little bots to actually, like, convey some of the character even when he was in city mode. But again, never a real focus. So, yeah, there's opportunity there. And you're even forgetting things like Omega Supreme. Look at the episodes that Omega Supreme starred in. Like, there's literally an episode called The Secret of Omega Supreme. Like, it's doable. They just didn't do it. And it's shocking because it's one of the most expensive figures at the time. And they didn't do an episode for it. You would think that's like rule number 1 of doing a toy line. Push the big expensive one. Didn't do it. So unfortunately, we never really got a chance to see Metroplex as a starring character. Kind of a wasted opportunity. This one hurts. This one hurts because this is one of my boys. This is one of mine that I really, really attach to. Yeah, so let's talk about Trailbreaker for a second here. Trailbreaker is one of those characters that I really do hardcore fixate on for some reason. I don't know why I liked him so much as a kid. I really do not know why I liked him so much as a kid. I liked the overall design. I liked the force field abilities because they always seem to come in clutch. And that is, again, where a lot of the pitfalls of these characters are. They don't get full episodes devoted to them, not because they aren't good characters, but because they are sprinkled throughout the rest of the series in really strong ways. So writers do not feel like they have to devote an episode to a character who gets a lot of really good moments and scenes throughout the entire season. I would equate this to Teen Titans, for instance, where every Titan got a season devoted to them and having one big story specifically focused on them, except for Starfire. She didn't get a season of her own because her episodes throughout those 5 seasons were some of the strongest and most story-driven episodes, so the writers never felt like she needed a season of her own. Similar vein here to a character like Trailbreaker. Lots of appearances, lots of really cool moments where that force field came in clutch, right? So you do get a lot of really cool moments for the character, but you never get the character himself. You never get the personality behind him. And because he kind of comes across as this kind of like gruff veteran bot, Ironhide pretty much usurps a lot of his attention. So unfortunately, never got what he deserved. I really could have used a little bit more Trailbreaker, and I'm just thankful that Skybound seems to have much more focus on him than Ironhide. Finally, a little bit of attention. But I could have used it in back then, too. Now, we have talked about this one before. We've done entire episodes on this channel about this. Let's talk about Arcee again. For as much importance as we put on Arcee for being the very first female Transformer with major focus, not the first one in the franchise, but the first one with major focus, the first recurring one, she really does not get much attention. She's mostly playing sidekick roles. You know, and her major appearances would be like 5 Faces of Darkness, where she's mostly Springer's sidekick, or Only Human, where she is not nearly as involved in the story as, you know, Rodimus and then Springer and Ultra Magnus, who are kind of the ones who save the day in the end. So you really don't get much of like an Arcee focus. Her best shot is during Rebirth, where she has to binary bond with Daniel to save his life. But even then, she really doesn't get to take a major spotlight because she doesn't have a toy out. So why put major story focus on a character who does not have any toy and will not have any toy? The truth is, as it always has been, Sunbow did not want Arcee. Hasbro did not want Arcee. If it wasn't for the writers of the movie, she would not exist. So they really did treat her that way. Like she was an afterthought. Like she was a tag-along. Like she's a token inclusion, just so they didn't look sexist. Well, you still kind of did. Like you made her hot pink with high heels. And you didn't give her any kind of toy support until we got to a modern age where we had an internet to complain about it. Arcee deserved better, and I don't think we need to put her on as high a pedestal as we do just because of like that place in history, because frankly, all of it is under dispute. You could argue that Elita 1 had stronger story connection and stronger story focus than Arcee did. She needed episodes of her own. Like, if you're going to create the character, even if it's begrudgingly, let the character do something, you know? Let them focus. Let them be a feature. It's not selling a toy, though, so they didn't let her. And that's a shame. Now, here's the weird thing. At one point, of all characters to include on this list, number 1 was going to be Broadside. Because Broadside is the only triple changer that didn't get a story focus. Not a single one. But, that again felt almost easy. And then again, there's an obvious number 1. There's an extremely obvious number 1. Remember how we talked about Trailbreaker? What I said there? Here's the character that personifies having a lot of really important moments, but never an episode because at that point the writers don't feel like they need it. Ratchet. Ratchet actually has elements of the story Bible that never really got used. Do you realize that he was at one time written to actually be a big partier? Like he was supposed to be more of a fun-loving Autobot than he actually turned out to be? That got scrapped. I feel like it got scrapped because his role is so important in the fiction, but also so set and defined. He is the battle medic, you know? He is the one who patches up the Autobots after every skirmish. This is a story about a 9-million-year-old civil war. A medic is going to be an absolutely vital character, especially if you're going to have multiple battles per episode, and many episodes did. You need that character to patch everybody up. You know, the closest he ever came to like a starring role in an episode was probably Divide and Conquer. And even that was kind of taken over by Wheeljack. Because even when they found out, okay, I need to replace this in order to repair him. And then Wheeljack steps in. Wait, I know what that is. I used to have one. I have a lab on Cybertron. And you go, and I'm just imagining Ratchet just kind of sitting there going like, this was mine. This was my moment. Why are you butting in? You had episodes. You had SOS Dinobot. That's your episode. But yeah, Ratchet puts in a ton of appearances, has a lot of importance. Importance enough that a lot of modern fiction is first to use Ratchet. He's in the main cast of the 07 movie and survives 3 of them. We don't talk about how he went out in number 4 because it was messed up. And then like animated had to use Ratchet, and they used Ratchet very, very well. Prime used Ratchet and used Ratchet even better than I think they was used in animated. IDW 1.0, the very first focus character was Ratchet. They even bookended that at the end of Lost Light. Pivotal character, you know, and really, like, one of the iconic Autobots. Unfortunately, had so many scenes, never really felt like they needed an episode just to him. So we never get anything outside of just, he's a repairman who's kind of gruff and kind of sick of his job. We never really got to expand any farther than that on poor Ratchet. At the end of the day, when it comes to G1, Ratchet's time to shine was in the comic book, where he had very major plot implications. And I guess that's covering the base as far as Ratchet's G1 fiction goes. But that is my list. There are obviously Autobots and Decepticons who also did not get story focus in episodes. Feel free to discuss them. I threw in one honorable mention in there just for the sake of mentioning Broadside, but you could even make an argument that Shockwave didn't have too many focus episodes, depending on what you count as a focus. So, feel free to debate, and feel free to tell me how wrong I am. No, they starred in this episode. I know you're out there. But thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.